What is going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of Second Guessan with Stressan. This is your host, Garrett Williams, aka Houston Texans, Texans commenter. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This week's a little bit different. We've kind of been slowly phasing into the off season, but we got some exciting news. We already had Bobby Slowick fired, and we, in my opinion, somewhat quickly fulfilled that position. So I'm excited. Here to take live Q&A to kind of get y'all's thoughts or questions, as well as provide my, insider opinions on the situation as well. Just kind of typically how we do it, just kind of weave back and forth between questions and opinions. So shout out BG coming through. Hey, engineer said finally. Yeah, I wish I had the time to do this more often. I mean, I really enjoy it. Shout out Case Newton on IG. What up, brother? Um, Everyone else on IG tuning in. We got the TikTok going as well. We have CJ Stroud is the name. He says, "Guys, I'm CJ Stroud." That's what your name says. So what's up, bro? We got August says, "What's your opinion on the Nick Caley hiring?" Yeah, I mean that's I guess we'll get to that. I think first, like what I'd like to point out is things that I had addressed on social media. I mean, y'all know that my preferred candidate was Chip Kelly, and going into the search, I had two things that I was weighing, and in hindsight, maybe I was weighing these two things too much, so just as an overreaction to what we saw from Bobby Slowick. But for me, the big thing I wanted after having the experience that we had with Bobby Slowick was number one, experience. Bobby Slowick was a first time OC. He did great his first year, and then he got adjusted to his second year, and his downfall was his lack of inexperience, in my opinion, and his inability to adjust to defenses now adjusting to him. All year there's all this talk about sophomore slump for CJ Stroud. My opinion was that it was more so a sophomore slump for Bobby Slowick. A lot of the condensed formations. So yeah, the other part too. So the two criteria that I was weighing heavily for a new OC was number one, I wanted someone with an experience, and number two, I wanted to get away from the Shanahan scheme. And as I was going to say, reasons for that was, defenses adjusted to him the second year. And it wasn't only him, it was other true Shanahan schemes. It seemed like the Niners struggled. It seemed like the Dolphins struggled. And, a big part of it, in my opinion, was the heavy use of condensed formations, which can be a double-edged sword. We had great success with them last year and this year. It provided a lot of chances, for us to get these deep in breaking routes and whatnot. But from what I saw, starting as early as week 3 against the Minnesota Vikings, when you have these condensed formations, you just invite more defenders into the box, safeties, corners, nickelbacks. And an adjustment we saw from Brian Flores and the Minnesota Vikings was he started bringing heat off the edge, or doing simulated pressures. And now you can show a look with 9 guys potentially blitzing and backing off, rather than spreading the ball out and kind of, limiting, what the defense can do or show. So that was a big reason, I wanted to get away from the Shanahan scheme. And another part of that too, like the inexperience and the Shanahan scheme both kind of, together were like a perfect storm for Bobby Slowick to not do good this year. The other part of that is the run game. It's known for the wide zone run game, which we've talked about a lot. All of us as fans have talked about a lot, but typically your more normal standard, run blocking scheme for an offensive lineman is, hey, just, big boy football, block the guy in front of you. That's it. You don't think much, just mano a mano, block the guy in front of you. That's more of your gap scheme. But wide zone is more of like a finesse, technical, intellectual type of scheme. It's known to be pretty rigorous as far as the steep learning curve. And, I was pointing that out, that a lot of these Shanahan schemes, when they're implemented at new places, it kind of takes, 1, 2, 3 years to really get rolling. But so the big thing for me is you have to be able to adapt to your personnel. Our offensive linemen were not these smaller, agile, more cerebral guys that fit a wide zone scheme. We have more of the big guys who are maulers that want to block the guy right in front of them. And it was apparent too. I mean, I was frustrated like all year. I was kind of tracking the zone versus gap, count like the splits, and Slowick and the Shanahan scheme, they're heavily. It was like almost 80-20. Sorry, give me 1 second. I got a little bit of cotton mouth. Let me get a sip of water here real quick. Sorry about that for the podcast listeners later. A little bit of dead air, but yeah, so with that being said, obviously gap scheme better suited our personnel for O line in the run game. And it was obvious, like I was tracking early on, it was, probably 80-20, there's like as far as percentage of zone to gap. And then there was a stretch in the middle of the season, like 2 or 3 games where the trend started to flip, primarily the New England game. And I think it was mostly because Damian Pierce was in the game when Mixon was hurt. So, obviously Damian Pierce is a better downhill gap running back as opposed to a zone scheme where you're, forced to use your vision and be instinctual. So I think that was part of it. And to me, it was no coincidence. Like it was obvious, like plain day. Like when we run these plays, we're better. The O line blocks better. The running backs do better. And then he went back to the zone for the rest of the year. And then we find out later in the year, that come, in my opinion, I noticed it in the Tennessee game. And then obviously the playoffs, the Chargers and the Chiefs. And those last 3 games, the starting offense did really well in the gap scheme. And D'Amico Ryans even touched on this in his Coffee with Coach with Mark Vandermeer and John Harris. And, DJ Bieneme, reporter for the Texans from ESPN, I had talked with him on Twitter about it. He said, like, the players are the ones, he notated that there was more use. And then it's backed up by the data from PFF, the splits. And he said it was, requested by the players. So, like, to me, it's like, Bobby maybe one is young and inexperienced, so he just knows what he knows and he's not used to having to adapt to his personnel. And also, number two, he's limited by what he knows with that scheme. That scheme seems to be very rigid. It's great when things work, but really it just relies upon a beast ass O line and a beast ass tight end, and it's supposed to make everything easy for the quarterback. So it was just tough. I mean, I had mixed feelings about Bobby. I wasn't quite, um, as hard on him, especially early on, as the rest of the public. I had my moments where it got worse and my frustration was higher. But I still think he can be a great OC down the road. I think this is a good learning experience from him, like learning, like, hey, I don't need to be so rigid. I need to be, learn to be more dynamic. Maybe he can go somewhere else where he can learn some new variations to add to his scheme if he gets another chance. But with that being said, though, because of what we saw, I was like just gung ho on those 2 things. And as we talked about last week, my criteria, having someone with experience and having someone that runs a spread offense, not a Shanahan offense, I was Chip Kelly was the perfect match for that. And then, you had all the connections that Amico Ryans, he was his coach, and then he was at Ohio State under Ryan Day, where CJ had played with Ryan Day and, loved that offense. So that was what I thought. And to me, like my point was, I was going to say, it was just crazy how, like, you know, fans wouldn't let other fans speculate. Like if you said you wanted Chip Kelly, then, people would come after your neck and just act like they knew all this info. It's like during this, week or 2 week span of having a offensive coordinator search, it's like all of a sudden everyone became an insider. To me, it was just crazy. It was just like everything's a fact. You couldn't mention Chip Kelly. Oh, he's not coming. He's on the recruiting trail. That means he's not coming. That never happens. And sure enough, he gets a freaking job with the Raiders. The other part of it too is, I haven't heard an interview, so he's definitely not a candidate. Like that doesn't matter. I mean, the recruiting trail stuff didn't matter. Interview didn't matter. It was obvious this whole time, the interview process, that Nick and D'Amico did an absolutely amazing job of keeping things in house. They ran a tight ship. No one knew shit. No one knew anything. I'm sure all the local insiders were frustrated as hell because every time any news broke about a candidate interviewing, almost any time it happened, the interview had already happened. So it was kind of after the fact. But people were still using the point of like, well, I haven't heard of an interview being announced. I'm like, that doesn't mean someone's off the list. So I did feel vindicated when he did go to the Raiders out of nowhere. And I also, we all saw the contract. He got $6 million a year when the top paid OCs currently are $3 million. So he got double the highest paid offensive coordinator, which is insane. So I still am curious and would like to know whether there was interest from the Texans or not, or if it was solely a money, or if there was no interest, or if money was an issue. I tend to think they at least inquired. I mean, I would like to know if there was any interview or talks, but I mean, regardless, like I'm not hanging on to it. I'm just addressing that. But I'll get to some questions and then I'll get into, uh, you know, my thoughts on Caley, and the concerns I had that I addressed, and where he fit into that. Let's see. We got some good comments here. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Let's see. Engineer K says, "How will the Luca trade affect LeBron legacy?" That is the $1 million question. It's got to affect it one way or another. We know that for sure. Engineer says Chip would have been awesome, but 6 mil was probably too much. Yeah, man. I mean, once I saw that, and I tweeted out, and this could be wrong, but like all the info that I saw online, and it seems to be backed up from like pretty reliable sources. D'Amico makes 4.5 million a year, so you were going to hire a guy and pay him more than your head coach. I mean, at that point, it's like you got to rework his contract and everyone else's contract. So yeah, I mean, no OC is worth that much. RK Shizzo says, "I'm glad I was able to catch a live stream. Love your work, Stressans." Oh, appreciate you, bro. Yeah, appreciate that. And if you ever miss it too, I mean, on the bottom, all my info is there. Twitter keeps it up. Where you can rewatch it. Obviously on YouTube, you can go to the live section and rewatch. And then now I upload it to Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. Texan, what up, G? Appreciate you tuning in, bro. Not a lot, just same old, same old. Case says, "Have we extended Stingley? If not, should we? And how much will it cost?" We have not, and yes, we should, and we should pay him whatever he wants. He's worthy of the top paid corner in the league for sure. Throw those H's up, Texan. Engineer, when you got Dalton blocking the other team's edge rusher one, it says a lot about your OC's intelligence. Yep. I mean, that's case in point number one. If anybody tries to defend or justify certain things, just be like, this happened over and over and over. And then in the biggest game of the year and the biggest drive of the year, it happened like 4 times where Dalton Schultz was asked to block George Karlaftis or Chris Jones. Like, what are we doing? you know? And it's also like, I will say too that I'm starting to come around. Like, Schultz definitely didn't have the year that we liked, and he didn't look the same. But I'm realizing too, like, okay, all these players that we hardly criticize, like, how different do they look with the new OC now? Like, Schultz, as bad as he was last year, how much of that was because he was put into bad positions? He was asked to do things that he couldn't do, So that is the encouraging, optimistic side of having hopefully a better, new, more innovative OC. RK Shizzo says we haven't given extended yet. No, we haven't extended him yet. Engineer says, should we? Is crazy. Yeah, it's extending Stingley is a no brainer. He's if not the best top 2 corner in the league for sure. And if y'all haven't watched his interview with Ryan Clark on the Pivot, it's a really good watch. Him and his dad, it's great stuff. Shizzo says, "Are you happy with Popovich staying?" Yes, I am. So I'll talk about Caley and then I'll talk about the staff. But I may have a contrarian opinion on some of those things, but I'm blessing, man. Carlos, shout out Carlos, says, "Great show as always, bro." If y'all haven't, check out my timeline. Carlos wrote a good article. He not only has his own podcast, but he also writes for RS Skina, a Latino publication, and he wrote an article on Xavier Restrepo, slot receiver out of Miami. Is a good piece. Brandon Hallman, shout out Brandon, the OG of Texans content. It's funny when stop saying Chip Kelly is going somewhere. It's actually stop saying Chip Kelly is leaving because I'm too lazy to write an article about it for my occupation. Yeah, I won't get too much into that, but that's wild, bro. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but I'm not talking about any single person in particular, but like there were just a lot of people. Anytime I would post stuff, would just be like harassing me, just acting like I was just being this oblivious fan. Like I was just using common sense logic, and like what I was trying to paint the picture is like just because people speculate things doesn't mean that it's true. And then there is a report by Jonathan Jones, and that's discredited, and then you know just because you don't hear something doesn't mean something can't happen. and we saw what happened. So I mean, that's all I was trying to say. Like I wasn't saying it's gonna happen. I was just saying don't close the door. And he got hired. I wonder if the Raiders fans had the same conversations, if they all wanted Chip Kelly, and if they had people saying, well, we haven't interviewed him. He's on the recruiting trail. You're a stupid ass. You're a psycho. Like, I bet you they had some of that going on. I bet the people that wanted him are like laughing at the people that were hating on it. I mean, I don't know if some of it just comes from like a place of like hate for the guy or what. I mean, if there was other reasons, cool, say it. Like, if you think he's an asshole and he doesn't fit, then say it. Like, that's what I sense. I don't know. It was just a whole weird thing. Like a lot of people acted really strange during this process. Jesse says, "Do you think Caley can get the best out of Stroud?" 1000%, I do. Brandon says, "Sometimes they say the quiet part out loud." Yeah, pretty crazy. I'm just finishing the main comments here, and then I'll get over to TikTok and Instagram. So if I haven't shouted it out, just give me a second. I'm working through as fast as I can. Texan says if the Raiders gave him $6 million a year, there's no way Houston was going to pay him the same amount as D'Amico. Facts. Brandon says, can't forget a terrible protection call that never worked all year, leading to Ollie Gay instantly sacking Stroud while wearing a 99 Texans jersey in NRG. That hurt, man, because I was a big fan of Ollie Gay in training camp, and I wanted us to keep him, and he was one of those bubble cuts. And yeah, that was, he had a big play against us. Engineer says Joe Mixon is back at it with the eye emojis. Last time we did that, we got digs. Yeah, I need to go check the timeline on that. Is that true? I don't know. Sometimes these athletes, this time of the year with the NBA trade deadline and rumors flying around, people kind of just buy into it. When we saw it on NBA Twitter, there was like, I think NBA players and accounts all tweeting the eyeball emojis, and people were just doing it just to mess with people. So who knows? I might tweet it here pretty soon. It's the eyeball emoji season is what we call it. Let me catch up on IG. Marcus Wiley says, I want Mbuka. And I do too. I mean, it depends on what happens with which veteran receiver we sign. If we sign a slot receiver, he's out of the question, in my opinion. But if we don't, I would love to get him in the first. Marcus also says, you think we're getting T. Higgins? No, he is too expensive, one. And number two, I know people hate when I say this, but he is not a personnel fit. He is an X receiver. Nico Collins is an X receiver. They're the same big body receiver. You can only have one starting X receiver on your offense for it to make sense. That is out of the three positions, X, Z, and slot, which is H or F. That is the most rigid or limited receiver position in terms of skill sets as far as, diversity. They're more of the straight line guys. So I've been seeing, rumors about trading for DK Metcalf. He also fits into that bucket. T. Higgins and DK Metcalf will not be good fits for the Texans. I'm sorry. You may disagree with me, but you rarely ever see two big X receivers on the same team. It doesn't mesh, and it's a waste of money. Again, it's like a basketball team. You don't get 5 centers. You don't get 5 point guards. You need diversity of skill sets. Ethan Pena on IG says OC hire. Yeah, we're going to get to in a second. Nick Caley, I'm very happy about it. And then Gothic Edix, that's a sweet name, on IG says, I have a good feeling about the Texans finally making it past the divisional round. I do too, man. I feel good. All we needed was just an above average offense, and we could have done it, and we didn't have it. So if we can just marginally improve on offense, I would assume the defense will continue to get better. I see us coming back. Marentes 91 heard Anya. Have you heard anything about the potential $2 billion in upgrades to the stadium? Hope the new Texans president can make it happen. I have not, but I mean, the fact that we fired a president who seemed to be doing a good job and then hired somebody with the background that he had basically in fundraising and building facilities. I mean, if you kind of connect the dots, it seems like that's what they want to do. Just knowing the McNairs, Hannah McNair especially, she seems like a progressive owner in the sense that she's constantly trying to do new stuff. I mean, you see the uniforms, and I would not doubt that at all. Let me check out the TikTok. Let's see. Shout out to people on TikTok tuning in. AJR says, any news or insight on wide receivers? I can get to that after the OC stuff, but Stephon Diggs, in my opinion, is the most likely candidate for us to re-sign. And I believe that date is soon. I can go into that in detail here in a second. August says, who do you think we could get at the 25th pick? Yeah, it's tough. I mean, right now, this time of the year before free agency, you have so many holes. So you do all these mock drafts, but you really don't know because once you have a clearer picture. But I mean, it could be a receiver, it could be O lineman, it could be um, it could be a tight end. I mean, it could be a safety. I would say probably for sure right now it's more than likely going to be a receiver or O lineman, but this could all change. Uh, and Horns on TikTok says the offensive line has to go and then answer some questions. That's not a question, but I read your statement. If that's what you would like, if you want to ask some question, Horns on TikTok, continue to do so. I'll get to you when I can. I'm trying, brother. Yeah, let me get a couple more over here on the main chat, and then I'll get into my thoughts on the hire. Let's see what we got. Brandon Hallman says, "Who is even out there? Maybe it's just NFL honors relates." I think he's talking in response to the uh, Joe Mixon eyeball emoji. Who knows what it is? It's silly season. It's eyeball season, and it was 7 hours ago. Engineer said, and then Lance Shepard said, "Looking ass" with the eyeball emojis. Shout out Lance, that's my guy. Yeah, dude. I mean, who knows what it is? He could be trolling. Brandon says maybe the eye emojis means we got digs again. I wouldn't doubt that. And I'll get into that in just a second. And then engineer says, God, I hope not. I don't know if you're talking about getting digs or not, but engineer says Colston Loveland is my dream at 25, him or Luther Burden. I like both those players. Good tight end and good receiver. Lance says, damn, I thought T. Higgins and Nico would be crazy together. Again, I mean, it's my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't see them fitting well together. I mean, they're the same. They're both straight line, field stretching, vertical, post, dig, comeback type um, route tree where they're not, as versatile sideline to sideline, that kind of Z or slot receiver stuff as far as wiggle, I guess is what you could say. I mean, I could be wrong that they could do it, but I mean, even then, the money, I mean, T. Higgins is going to be the top free agent out of all free agents. So the money would be insane. And our cap right now, it's around 3 million, but I talked to Texans cap. He confirmed on Twitter. Shout out Texans cap. If y'all don't follow him, I'm sure y'all do. But right now is a great time to follow him as we all speculate things we want our team to do. But he was saying he could see our cap, which is currently around 3 million, go up to 40 million, depending on the amount of restructures. I believe Titus Howard, Nico Collins, and then potential cut candidates like Shaq Mason could save us some money. And then a big part of it too is just the annual cap increase. But I will say though, I've been trying to caution fans. Like I know it's not fun to hear, but last year's offseason was like bananas. I feel like that had to have been one of the most exciting, crazy off seasons for any team ever. Like just all the stuff that went on, but like especially from free agency, like the amount of money we had coming off a great rookie year of your quarterback, and you're in this window. We had the Danielle Hunter signing, the Joe Mixon trade, which is pretty much a signing, the Stephon Diggs trade, which is pretty much a signing, Danico Autry. I mean, you had all these big splash signings. And I don't know that we'll have nearly as many, like maybe one or two. And on top of us having up to potential 40 million in cap, we also have like 20 plus free agents on our own team that we have to address. You could argue a lot of those are, not big impact guys, like kind of role players, but there's 2 or 3 or 4 on the D line that I think are pretty significant. Guys like Derek Barnett, and the other ones are slipping my mind, but I know there's a couple on the D line that we definitely want to re-sign, I would think, for $1 million or $2 million a year. But those things add up. You got guys like Eric Murray. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of shit on him, but to me, I feel like he's underrated, undervalued, especially at the money we got him at, between special teams or just being a reliable. I feel like he wasn't nearly as bad as people thought, but I mean, he's not a bad third string, third on your depth chart safety, or he can plug and play and be a starter, or get into the box and play good there too. But my point is we have a lot of holes to fill too, so I don't think it'll be nearly the splurge we saw last year. So I'm doing this myself, y'all don't have to, but I'm trying to not get these, rosy colored glasses on thinking we're going to do this and that and this and this and that. And like, oh, we'll just cut that guy. Like it typically doesn't work out that way. But Nick Casario has shown he can get creative to work things out. So maybe we'll get more than I might expect. So, and then Brandon says, and then suddenly it's an edge to take over Barnett or Hughes spots. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but yeah, I mean, I think Hughes may be a free agent as well. Texan says, what do you think about Gray Zabel? I love Gray Zabel. He is the versatile interior O lineman out of North Dakota State. FCS, it's 1AA. He is he's awesome. I was kind of keeping my eye on him early. I hadn't really dove in, and then watching him throughout the Senior Bowl every day, he just continued to impress. He started out as like a 3rd round pick now, and then he went to like 2nd. Now he may be in the 1st. So, but he's a beast. He's a mauler, and he can play center, guard. I think he may even play tackle too. But I mean, played both guard spots. The dude's a hoss. Brandon says, take Shamar Stewart to take over Barnett and Hughes spot, and then take over Autry's role after a year. That's not a bad idea. I mean, that dude's a beast. There's a lot of depth at the defensive line position in the draft, a lot of depth at the tight end position in the draft, and also the running back position. So, RK Shizzo says, I would like to see Slayton and Nico. Darius Slayton, yes, that is a name that I like as well. So he would be the Z receiver. He would play basically tank spot, which is, 70% of his snaps are outside, 30% are slot, depending on the sets. Yes, he would be someone who he might be kind of pricey, but he's not going to be nearly as pricey as these other guys. And I feel like he's a very underrated veteran receiver. I like that name as well. Shep says, yeah, you're right, though. They are the same players. He's talking about Nico and Higgins. Texan says tight ends and O linemen. Would love that. Yeah, what the tight end thing is we would have to cut somebody. We got Brevin coming back. You got Schultz, and you got Stover. That's 3 right there. And then I'm not sure where Irv Smith is at, if he's a free agent or not. And then Teagan. I mean, those 2 obviously you could probably do away with, but there's a position there. Engineer says, nah, I'm ready to get my heart broken. Hey, I don't blame you, man. But let's see. Let me check a couple on IG, and then I'll give my thoughts. Oh, we're good. I'm all caught up. But yeah, so Nick Caley, like I mentioned, my 2 criteria, I feel like I overreacted to my criteria. And I said too, like, I had Sean Pendergast on here, and he made this point, and I agree. Like, it's just how I am as a fan. I'm a pretty optimistic fan. Like, basically, no matter who we hired, I would talk myself into it. But as far as like the criteria that I had, and it was just like me having that's the fun part of being a fan. Like during stuff like this, is to like kind of like root for the guy that you would like to have. But it doesn't mean that when we don't get them that like the sky's falling and you're all freaking out. But anyways, experience and no Shanahan scheme. There was, Caley has no experience calling plays, so I was concerned about that. And then, Shanahan scheme, I will admittedly say, like, before I really looked into it, I assumed that it was very similar. But shout out Jacob on Twitter. He's done a great job. But, we had some combos, and, he kind of made me realize that, the McVay tree of this offense, of the Shanahan tree is, it's pretty different. Texans Cap put out a tweet, highlighting like the motion usage, and then motion at the snap. And, motion was higher in the McVay offenses or the Rams offense last year. And also motion at the snap was like way higher. So like there's one thing to motion and get set, but like motion while the ball is being snapped, that's like a whole nother beast. I mean, if you motion and set, then okay, the defense can set and it's not always that impactful. But like motioning while the ball is snapped, that can really mess with the defense. So those 2 things I liked. And then another thing on there was the use of 11 personnel. I had saw like a graph like the year prior, and it seemed, like the Texans and all the Shanahan scheme teams were, all like 60% or something like that. So I had just assumed that this year was the same, that, oh, we already run a lot of 11 personnel, but their use of 11 personnel was that much higher. I think it's like I'm guessing like it was like 80% or something crazy. So and I was aware of this too, that McVay recently has done a great job of uh, running out of 11 personnel. So typically with 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, like, oh, you're just airing it out. It's basically like an air raid. That's not the case. So this would indicate addressing a concern that we've talked about, or something that I want was to spread it out. One of my big concerns was with our pass pro, was running these condensed formations, always having tight ends in there and bringing everything inside. Now at 11 personnel, you're going to spread it out. You lighten the box, you spread it out so they think you're going to pass, and now you run it. So it's I like that. And so yeah, I mean, that kind of got addressed. I'm like, okay, this is different. And then another way that I realized that this offense was different was, we've talked about it on the show quite a bit, and just a minute ago, the zone scheme and the gap scheme. That was probably my biggest complaint with that offense. And it's not necessarily the zone scheme itself, it's just it did not fit our personnel. So when I look into going into next year, given our cap situation with only $3 million right now, and given us being basically tied into all of our linemen, your options are continue to run zone scheme, or find an OC that can run gap scheme. You know, the whole thing is adaptability. Build an offense around your personnel, not the other way around. So I think, when this first happened, I think D'Amico hired Bobby because he was right there. They're friends. Oh, he's Shanahan's scheme. He's a bright guy. He's smart. He knows ball. He runs this scheme. I like it. And then, then you get him into your building, and it kind of go. And honestly, the first year, the running game sucked too. Like, we were terrible at it. So that was an issue as well. It's just the pass pro was a little bit better. But yes, and and he was a new coordinator, so he kind of had some new stuff people hadn't seen. But yeah, this year it was evident, like, I guess you kind of got unlucky that you got some. I mean, maybe it's a learning lesson for D'Amico, but I mean, he basically hired someone who he thought he knew well that could do this or that, and that is why the experience is or was a big concern for me, because it is a gamble. I mean, you know, I can read and hear all these things about Caley and feel better about it, but until we see it happen, it'll still be a concern. I'm just not nearly as concerned as what I was, just from what I've heard already and the numbers that I'm pointing out. And there could be the argument too that, and that's what I was questioning, and a lot of people were saying, okay, like, we're assuming this guy spent 2 years in LA, that he's going to be just like Sean McVay. So that's a valid concern. But I mean, you look at the other OCs, Zach Robinson, Kevin O'Connell, guys that came out of this tree, more often than not, pretty much pan out. I mean, you can point to other cases where they haven't, but Zach Robinson in Atlanta is our most recent case. I don't, exactly recall the numbers, but if you look into them, their offense did pretty good, and the breakdown of like the type of plays they ran, indicating they spread it out, is the same. But yeah, the other point too is the gap in zone. Getting back to that, Sean McVay, the last 2 years, he's traditionally been more of a zone running scheme, but he's adapted to his personnel, to his O line, and to his running backs, and he's ran more gap than zone the last couple of years. And then Kevin O'Connell has shown that as well. I think the last year or last 2 years has also done that. And then Matt LaFleur is another offshoot of this, or similar to the McVay scheme, and he's pretty similar as well. So I know when we were looking at Stenavich, that was another thing. They, typically were a zone team, but then when they got Josh Jacobs, they went to more gap scheme and had success. So it's not about, I guess it is about being able to adapt to your personnel and not being rigid, and like I've mentioned it before, it's just ironic, as young and supposedly innovative Bobby was, if you did not know anything about him and you just watched his offense, you would assume that he was just this old school guy. He was stubborn. It was like the opposite of what you were supposed to be seeing. So I am with Nick Caley. I feel like he's more innovative. I probably shouldn't wade too much into this anecdote, but I don't know if y'all saw it. I shared it. Someone else had shared it, and I reshared it. It was from Texans Reddit, the subreddit. Someone who said that he worked with Nick Caley. He said they went to college together, which I believe is the same one that him and Casario went to. And basically, like ever since college, like he's known that he wants to be like the biggest and best in the coaching. Like that's so he's had his mind set and went to a school to where he could be groomed into becoming a head coach, gaining experience from other mentors and tutors. And then he included an example too where he had uploaded the team's playbook to PlayStation and put it on a bunch of memory cards and gave it to the whole team. And the whole team, seemed to have picked up the playbook a lot better because now they were playing, NCAA with the playbook. So that's like when I saw that, I was like, that's awesome. So I mean, his passion, he has a desire. And then I think in that same thread, the guy said, regardless, this guy will never fail because of one thing, and that's because of his drive. He said that his drive is unmatched, unparalleled. And that is something I can attest to. One of my good friends is the head coach at Incarnate Word, FCS school in San Antonio that I played for. And that is one trait about him. He's got a lot of these same traits that I just mentioned with Nick Caley, but I would say, and he's been there for 2 years. I think his record is like 20-4, 20-5. It's something crazy. First year was like, I think he was tied for conference, but then missed the playoffs. Second year, won conference and then went 2-3 rounds in the playoffs. But what I've noticed about him, one of the he's passionate, but the thing that sets him apart is his drive. His drive is insane. It's insane. And if you outwork everybody, it doesn't matter if you aren't the smartest, this or that. Like you're willing to do whatever it takes. Like you will succeed. So that hearing that makes me feel really good about him. And then now you're hearing stuff about how supposedly he was a big piece within the Rams room. Like maybe he was the one, telling McVay to kind of get creative and adapt. And then we should talk about too his background in New England. He was in New England for X amount of years. I don't have it pulled up, but I know a lot of people were getting concerned now about, oh, this is the Patriot South again. We're hiring all these Patriot guys. Nick Caserio's from the Patriots, and now we got an OC from the Patriots. And then you look at now some of these assistant hires. They promoted Cole Popovich from assistant O-line coach to O-line coach, who was also at New England. And then we hired, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm going to guess Shapinski. He was a senior assistant at the Rams. It was also with the Patriots prior. So now people are starting to get all worried. My thing is one, it's not a bad thing. I mean, they were there around greatness, around a dynasty with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Two, I would focus more so on the fact that it means that it's someone that he knows and he trusts. Same with us keeping Gerard Johnson and us keeping Popovich. People are upset with it, but it means that you know who they are. So I'll go ahead and address those two hires on the staff that he got. I know a lot of people were upset. I don't get the slander on Gerard Johnson. I didn't necessarily, and for one, I'm friends with Gerard. I had trained with him out of college. He's a great guy. He's very smart. He knows what the hell he's talking about. But I didn't have bias one way or another during this whole process. I had those two boxes, like I mentioned, experience and scheme. And so like, his, ability to be the OC with that lens that I had on it didn't make him, the top candidate. I didn't necessarily not want him, but I didn't have him at the top of my list. My list, I had Brian Johnson, I had Jeff Nixon, and then I had Nick Caley off the people that we had interviewed. I wanted like a Chip Kelly or a Doug Peterson. That didn't happen. But I mean, regardless, it doesn't matter. And I should say in all this too, like one way to like validate these hires is, like for me personally to like feel good about it is if I had these concerns as some dumbass fan who doesn't know shit, I don't know these freaking guys. I've never talked to these guys. Like, and that's something we need to remember. Like, and I don't mean to like sound like conceit or sound the wrong way when I say this, but like we get so hyper focused on this stuff, but like we have to step back and be like, we don't know shit about this. Like, yes, we can question things, but like we're not in there talking to these guys, interviewing them, talking to guys that know them and getting intel on them. Like all we know is what we've seen on an offense and what they were under that. And that can be said about the assistants being kept too. So that's something to keep in mind. But the point is, it comes down to, do you trust Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans? Because if my concern for us hiring Nick Caley was experience and scheme, and I thought, oh, he's inexperienced, he's a dumbass, he won't play calls or call plays the right, he won't adjust, and then he's going to run the Shanahan scheme. Like, you don't think that they asked those questions, and you don't think that they thought those were concerns for themselves too? And I'm telling this to myself too. I'm not like preaching to the choir. Um, but so like that's something to keep in mind too, is like I guarantee you those were concerns for them. I guarantee you they were addressed, and I guarantee you if they hired him, they were not concerns. So that's the way like to make it justified if you are concerned. And I'm not telling anyone how to think about it. Like, you can still question it and not like it. You can still be idle and wait to see. Like, that's, I mean, I'm just saying from my perspective how I kind of justified it. But again, I'm going in a spider web, kind of wrapping around different thoughts here. But I was talking about Gerard Johnson. Yeah, so I don't get like the argument against him. So keeping Gerard Johnson and Cole Popovich is a good thing. Typically, when a new OC comes to a team, it's kind of a mix between retaining guys on staff and bringing in new guys. The retaining guys on staff part of it is about continuity. So, one of the cons of potentially firing Bobby Slowick, which CJ Stroud brought up in his presser, was, you don't want to go through a new system and this and that. So this kind of sounds like the best of both worlds. It's like kind of a new system, but kind of not. So there will be a lot of familiar things. So CJ's not learning a whole new system. Now he's just adding wrinkles. And then also you're keeping some of the same coaches in place. So things aren't just drastically different. And another benefit of keeping those guys on staff is these guys were here for the last regime, so they can tell you what the hell went wrong. And, I feel like people just overweigh, I shouldn't say importance, but like the authority and ability of assistant coaches. Like, people are arguing why retain Gerard or why potentially promote him down the road when CJ had a bad year last year. CJ sucked, and he sucked because Gerard sucks. It's like, you don't know that shit. Like, and honestly, a position coach can only do so much, and it starts with the scheme. If the scheme sucks, then everyone's hands are tied. And they're like, well, why didn't they speak up? You think an assistant is going to tell his boss what to do? Like, do you tell your boss what to do at work? Like, it's just like the logic on some of these arguments just drive me crazy. And again, it points back to like, we don't know. Like, we aren't there. We aren't in the quarterback room. We don't know what Gerard's telling CJ. We aren't there to know his intellect, his mind, all this stuff. Like, you're basing it off of one high level opinion that doesn't really translate, because if the scheme is messed up, then like you can only do so much. And the same thing can be said with Cole Popovich. Hand up, I initially was like, before anything happens, like, I don't want anything to do with it. I had that, high level view of, you know, last year's O-line was bad. He was the assistant. It's going to be the exact same. Nope, I want out. But like as Aaron Wilson started to report, hey, it may be a possibility he's retained, and you see that he was at New England with Caley. Okay, there's a connection. He knows him. And then you hear about basically he got fired because of the COVID thing. He was like, didn't believe in, the regulation, so took a year off. That like stunted his growth. He was on the way up. You hear about guys like Joe Mixon, the O-line, like loving him, praising him, wanting him back. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That means I think he's a good coach. He's probably one of the guys that wanted to run more gap scheme, but because he was an assistant O-line coach, he couldn't do anything. Again, overweighing the value of his position. We think, or people are saying that him as an assistant O-line coach should have stood up and said something. I mean, you're like fifth on the chain of command. You think this guy is going to have the ability to tell someone what to do? I mean, like, he can try to like suggest stuff, but you can't just. I feel like we're given, you have to have, your commander in chief. That's just the way organizations and structures work. I mean, you know, maybe there's some more dynamic or more, open-minded, staffs, but like to a certain extent, you have to have someone calling the shots, and, you can't just have someone underneath you telling you what to do. So the whole point of those retentions is, the best way to put it is you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't get rid of the bad, but also get rid of the good. You can get rid of the bad, Bobby Slowick, the bathwater, and you can keep the baby. You can keep Gerard. You can keep Cole Popovich. We don't have to assume like we know that those guys are bad just because Bobby was bad. Retention and staff happens all the time. And, you have to assume that is what Nick and D'Amico did. They said, okay, Bobby is the problem. Like, we love you. Like, you had a great year, and it kind of like maybe we could have kept you, but you're gone. These guys are still good. We think highly of them. We've invested time in them. We've developed them. They know the building, the system, the players, all that stuff. So, like, there's value in that. Yeah, so that was kind of crazy to me. But, and then as far as like building out the rest of the staff, Shapinsky, he seems like a great hire. He seems like he has a lot of knowledge coaching Tom Brady, been in the league for a while. And then I got lost on the other assistant hire, which was who was the other guy we hired? Somebody help me out in the chat. I'm having a brain fart. We hired Shapinsky and we hired, have we hired another guy yet? I don't think so. Maybe I'm missing one, but let me get to some messages. I had a couple thoughts I might have missed, but I'm sure we'll get back to them through the chat. Brandon says, have you looked at the Rams guards? Seemed like they were guards or over 330 in their scheme. I have not. It's a good point, but so yeah, a couple things. Hopefully, you know, Caley can get the type of players he wants, but hopefully, if he doesn't get exactly everything that he wants, he can find a way to work with what we have. Maybe we don't have that ability or those type of players, then maybe he can adjust around it. RK Shizzo says, I see B Jordan making a comeback this year. Yeah, man. I mean, he was excited about the hire. He made like a emoji tweet, but with the sunglasses. I think when the news came out. So I think we are forgetting about Brevin. I think he can have a big impact. Let me make sure that IG is good over here real quick. Yep, IG still good. Got a couple on TikTok. Don't want to leave y'all hanging over here on the talk. Offside Para says, how much do we have in cap? We have 3 million, but it could be up to 40 million before free agency starts. And then over on TikTok, we got Yellow Bull says, the Nico, you sure about that? I'm not sure. Or Dark Knight says we have 100K in cap room. Cut Titus. No, that is absolutely wrong, dude. This guy said we have 100K in cap room. Cut Titus, Shaq, Schultz to Nico. That's just wild. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys that are cut candidates, I know you can cut, before June 1st or after June 1st, but it's not as easy to just cut this guy. Like, you also have dead money. You have to weigh, okay, is it worth cutting this guy and losing 7 million to save 8 million? Like, or should I just keep him and try to make him work, So there's some tough decisions to be made like that. But I think Mason is definitely a potential cut candidate. I don't agree with trade Tunsil. No Offside says I'd even trade Tunsil. I don't agree with that. I've seen some of that, but I mean, he's an all-pro left tackle, really good at pass pro. If he's had struggles, you would think that he can continue to improve with the new coordinator that's supposedly innovative. And then Offside said, and trade Mechie. Potentially. I mean, Mechie is a guy. I would say that I'm more optimistic about Schultz. I'm still fine either way what we do, if we keep him or not, but maybe he's better. Caley is a tight ends coach, so maybe he can coach the tight ends who seem to not get a lot of good coaching last year. Maybe he can bring more out of him just from coaching, and more out of him from scheme, putting him in the right spot, not asking him to block, George Karlaftis every play. So maybe that's part of it. Same with Stover. We saw where he was asked as a rookie in his third game to block Jonathan Grenard, and we saw how that went. So stuff like that, motion, creativity, and then having played tight end as well can be a factor. But John Mechie, I had this revelation the other day in one of the group chats, but what if John Mechie's just been misused this whole time? Like, to me, he's a slot receiver, and he's good when he's a slot receiver, but maybe he's not so good when you ask him to block defensive ends, or when you ask him to do all these BS routes, or when you don't allow him the ability to run hot routes. Like, I'm not saying all these things did or didn't happen, but like, you can start to be like, okay, like, maybe a guy that we thought wasn't good can now all of a sudden be good with the new coordinator. And I'm not, I'm just trying to like paint that lens a little bit. But Brandon says kind of like Booker, Mimbo, Savania. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good players, man. I think he's talking about guards, big guards. And then he says if we look similar to the Rams, we may be going with guys that size. Yeah, that's a good point. Brandon says Pierce is better at gap scheme too, right? Yeah, facts, 1,000%. I mean, we saw that. Like, we were all on his ass all preseason, watching every snap he had, all 10 of them, dissecting them, and critiquing his vision in the zone scheme. But yeah, Pierce he's your typical, just I want to run somebody over, like run through a MFer's face. He just wants to run downhill. And that's what you want, I mean, you don't want him to think, you just want him to freaking run and run someone over. You don't want him running out wide and looking, and he just wants to hit a hole and go. Engineer says leadership is a big aspect of all of this. Slowick never held a position like any type of coach prior to becoming OC. That's a good point too. And, pure speculation on my part, but I think most of y'all would agree, and it sounds right. But I think a lot of the reason why the offense was bad and undisciplined with penalties, and you kept hearing each week, "Oh, we need to execute. We need to execute." Guys, not lining up right, or not running their route to the right depth, or technique, or whatever it may be. To me, that pointed back to coaching, and it pointed back to no accountability. Like, and I thought to myself, like, could you imagine Bobby Slowick getting in Laramie Tunsil's face, or like, holding any of these guys accountable? Like, again, it's an assumption, but I don't think that's the case. This Caley guy, dumb of me assumption. He seems like he could yell at somebody. So maybe it's improved there. And I do acknowledge that, it starts at the top with the head coach as far as discipline, but I do think that you are still responsible for your unit. Like, I mean, the head coach can't be everywhere. Yes, like overall there should be like a team wide thing, but as far as like, errors and mental mistakes, like that's in the coaching room. And there has to be some accountability there. I understand like you can bench a player, but it's not as easy as benching the whole team as a defensive coach. And that's another thing too, is that's what I've learned in this whole thing. Early on this year, when there were struggles, it came off in pressers as if D'Amico Ryans was just 100% delegating everything to Bobby Slowick. And as things went bad, like I was like, man, he needs to step in. Like if he knows we should run these type of plays, or if he knows he wants this type of play in the game, or this style, this game plan, he should be more involved. But I mean, he's the head coach, and then he's the defensive coordinator, and now we want him to go meddle in the offense. He wants to be able to 100% delegate to somebody on offense and know that they are good enough to do their damn job, that he doesn't have to worry about it. And so like it makes sense now. Like he basically did that, did not intervene all year, allowed Bobby to continue, gave him every chance on his own to fix it. And then once he showed that he couldn't do it, then it made it easier for him to fire him. And now he can try to find somebody, hopefully that Caley does this, that he can show that he can do it all on his own. It's also a good thing too, because you don't want to micromanage. I mean, it's just like any business. You want to hire great people and let them do their damn thing, and things work out better that way. Or if you hire someone just to, intervene all the time, then they feel like they can't do what they're asked to do. So it's a good thing that D'Amico is delegating the offense to the offensive coordinator. So that's another point on that as well. Brandon says Udinsky signed with the Jags. Oh, did he? I was hoping he would get on our team, because I know, we interviewed him and he's in the scheme. Dub says, who do you think we re-sign and let walk? I think we re-signed Stefon Diggs. One sec, I'm going to get some water. Yeah, so Stefon Diggs, Texans cap. Shout out Texans cap again. I'll make a post on this. I feel like not a lot of people know this, and this is from Texans cap perspective, from the salary cap perspective, but it's almost like a no-brainer for the Texans to want to re-sign Diggs from a salary cap perspective. So we had the trade for him last year for the second round pick. We had a favorable contract with a couple years left. I forget, 2 or 3 at pretty low APY, but we restructured his contract, in my opinion, for 2 reasons. The first one was to basically defer the money till this year, most of it, which I'm speaking right now just out of memory. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the when we restructured his contract, it had a void year, which is this year, basically meaning, we would have a salary cap hit for him um, a year after he's done playing for us. So he's a free agent now, but we still don't. We've already paid him his money, but on. So I'm learning this stuff too from Texans cap. There's a difference between cap and cash. Cash is money you pay to the player, like that gets paid through bonuses and guarantees, but then you can actually owe the money on your cap separate. So we added a void year cap wise, and so he will go $16 million against our cap this year. So we restructured it to defer money from last year to be able to sign other guys. And I also think that we restructured as a showing of good faith. You just traded for a guy, um, and so it sounds like either Diggs asked for it or we did it or together we worked together to not do him a favor, um, not do him a favor, but you basically got a guy who there's this rap about him being emotional and all this, BS talk about. Anyways, you trade for him, you want him to be happy. So you basically redo his contract. You give him essentially a 1 year deal where he's a free agent next year, pay him his money now, make it all guaranteed. So we did it for that reason. We did it to defer the money for our end and also to incentivize him to play better. But now we're stuck with a position to where, if we don't re-sign him, it will still cost us against our cap $16 million. So Cap also said too that there's a couple other layers to this in the sense that he proposed a contract. I think it was like in the range of 10 to 12 million APY over 3 years, and this was his own assumption or evaluation based off of his research and knowledge in the market, comparable wide receivers, etc. And he said he doesn't know if Diggs would take this, but in this scenario, if he were to sign with us, you again could rework his existing deal and essentially kick the can down the road and restructure the money to hit later. So you can either not sign Diggs and cost the team $16 million, or you can sign him and save almost $7 million. So and have the hit only be around 9 million. So like to me, it's like, would you rather have Diggs and have it hit 9 million against the cap this year, or not have Diggs and have it hit 16 million against the cap this year? To me, that's a no-brainer. And then the other wrinkle to this is I think it's until his contract is still like negotiable. Basically, we have until like February 15th or something like that. Again, I'll make a tweet about it and I'll confirm that it's all correct. It's in his newsletter too. If y'all don't sign up for his newsletter, he wrote a whole thing on it. So yeah, like basically that's what we're on watch for right now in this next week or so is if we will re-sign Diggs. So from just like the salary cap standpoint alone, it makes 1,000% sense. It also makes a lot of sense from productivity. I mean, he was a hell of a player for us last year. We saw what our offense looked like pre and post Stephon Diggs. There's no coincidence that, we went and got him to be that third down separator, that chain mover. He's a smart, savvy receiver. He's a great slot receiver now. He's kind of started at Z in his career, slowly transitioned towards slot, which a lot of these guys do because they have the knowledge of reading defense, and maybe your speed goes down a little bit. Not saying that's the case with him, but he's smart, he's savvy, can read a defense. He's a great contested catch guy, which is something you need in the slot. A reliable security blanket for CJ Stroud. You got the continuity, the chemistry. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I'll probably start assuming that. So now if you sign Diggs, he's your slot. I mean, he plays Z, the other outside receiver, in 12 personnel, 2 wide receiver sets. But anytime there's 3 receivers, 11 personnel, which we talked about earlier, the Rams were in a ton of last year, so you can expect us to do that too. That means that Diggs will be in the slot quite a bit. Yeah, I forgot why I was saying that, but now you just need one other receiver. So I was going to say, basically, if you re-sign Diggs, which it sounds like you should, that means he'll be your slot. So then now when you go into signing another free agent wide receiver or drafting one, you don't want to go get another slot if you just sign Diggs to a 2 or 3 year deal, in my opinion. So now it changes the dynamic of, all these mock drafts, which would be Ibuka, who I love, but if we get Diggs, scratch him off the list, scratch Restrepo off the list, scratch Cup off the list. To me, those are the same receivers. It's kind of similar to the Nico and T Higgins thing. But I will say, like, again, the Z and the F or the H, the slot receivers, they're more versatile. They can kind of play both. So it's not quite as rigid, in my opinion, as far as X receivers. Engineer, I'm honestly happy with hire. D'Amico and Nick have demonstrated they were taking the offensive side of the ball operations very seriously. Yeah, I agree. And you remind me of another point too that I kind of thought about when the other day when I was like speculating, potential candidates for Caley to hire as his assistants. I came to the realization that, I mean, people probably already know this, and I guess I did too, but I just haven't really thought about it much. You get so fixated on a head coach in the NFL as being like a good coordinator, and then on top of that, you fixate on them being a leader, or you fixate on their game management or game plans. One thing you tend to overlook and undervalue is their ability to hire and retain talent, hire, retain, and develop talent in the coaching staff. Like, again, they can't be anywhere and everywhere. It's just like any successful company. You hire great people, you identify them, hire them, allow them to do their job, you develop them, promote them. I mean, now that this is dumb that I'm just now thinking about it, but it's so similar to a company. It's so similar to the real world. Anybody who runs a successful company, if you get a good employee and they're at the bottom, they're going to move their way up. You can't just keep them at assistant O line coach their whole career. Like, they're going to either get promoted by you or by someone else. And so you constantly have to be able to replenish that farm or that staff. And I noticed that when going through Sean McVay, because I went through Sean McVay's staffs to see who Caley might hire, because typically when a new OC comes, they take who they know from their system. And so, like, I realized, like, this guy's had a new staff like every freaking year, dude, and he's still good. And like, all you hear about is a McVay tree, like all these guys popping up. Like, to me, that speaks volumes about Sean McVay. Like, yeah, he's a great football mind, a great play caller, a great game planner, but he is elite at hiring, like finding. So, like, that's the other thing too, is like, that's why I argued for keeping Gerard Johnson and Cole Popovich. Is if you see certain qualities and traits in the human, the person, not like the coach, not like, oh, he's the assistant, he's the QB coach and the QB sucks. Like, no, like, this guy has what it takes. He has the drive. He has the knowledge. He has the work ethic. All that stuff, like, that stuff matters. Like, and that stuff we don't know and we don't see. So, yeah. So that's something I realize is that's a big thing. And we'll see how D'Amico does. And knowing him and listening to him and seeing how his brain works, I think he'll be just fine in that. I don't think that we can weigh too much on the Bobby hire and immediately deem that he can't hire good coaches. I think that was, it's just his first hire. Like I said, it was out of San Francisco. It's who we knew. And, it was somewhat of a gamble, but I think this time around he knows. And that's why it's good to keep Gerard and Cole. Now you can continue to develop them. If you think about it, if things go the way we want, if Caley comes in here and balls the hell out, offense balls out, this guy could be a head coach in 1, 2, 3 years. I mean, Slowick was getting head coach interviews last year, this year. So that's something to think about as well. Is you're not only thinking about today, but you assume things go the way you want. So you're preparing yourself for the future to be able to hire from within. If you lose a coordinator due to being good, where your coordinator leaves to go to another job to be a head coach, the best case scenario is to have a system, have a culture built in that you can just keep pulling from. To me, that's the best way to do it. So that was just a thought that I had when going through that stuff. So engineer said, Garrett, no, it's time for Mechie to go. Again, I don't think that you can do that. Give me 1 second. I got someone hopping in real quick. I'm gonna play a quick video. Just give me 1 second, real quick. All right, I'm back. Yeah, the D'Amico Ryan coaching tree says Senor Teasy. Yeah, so I mean that's what happens. Like, so now it's not just about scheme; it's about the person, like the person, the developer, the recruiter, like and I everything you hear about D'Amico, screams that he can do that. So that's just something a revelation that I had, and I think it's stuff we know, we just don't think about it as much as we should. Brandon says, I think Woods and Shaq Mason and a few others are gone. Yep. I think Shaq is an obvious one. But Matthew says, re-sign Stephon Diggs or trade for Cooper Cup. Yeah, I don't know if you got in after I said that, but solely from money salary cap standpoint, 1,000% Stephon Diggs. We save money if we re-sign him potentially. And then Cooper Cup right now, his cap hits are high. Rams are reporting they'll pay some of it. He may get cut, so he may be less. And then from a talent standpoint, I'm fine with either. I know both have had their injuries, and those are concerns. But to me, they're pretty similar. I think obviously Cup is younger. I think people are over criticizing Cup on his ability. In my opinion, I know he came off an injury, but I mean the dude. I saw something about the most catches in the first so many years of his career, and he's the top. I mean, like he's freaking good, dude. He's smart. He's savvy. He's quick, explosive, all that good stuff. So. Uh, Over on TikTok. We're good. But yeah, I think I covered most of it. So we talked about, the OC, the whole thing around the OC, the retention of the staff. We still got positions to fill. So that'll be interesting to see. Running backs coach. Gerard's the quarterback coach. Popovich is the O line coach. We still have the running back coach. We still have the tight ends coach. So we don't know if some of those guys will get fired or wide receiver coach. So that'll be interesting to see. I would assume that we see one or two more guys from that tree, probably from the Rams. That's just based off of my research of similar situations. But yeah, so I will be going live tomorrow at 10 a.m. With John Crumpler. If y'all don't know John, John is awesome. He writes for the Texans Wire and he's on Twitter. He does a lot of film breakdown. He is a doctor. He is very smart. He is a good football mind. He is great at analyzing film. He was on this Nick Caley hire since the beginning. So we will get his insight, and he's done like some pretty, in-depth dives, more so into like his actual scheme, like we had talked about. So he can give us some better answers as to, you know, things we may or may not expect coming from his offense. So that will be exciting. I'll be sure to promote it. As far as this show here, I will post it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts here in just a minute. But yeah, as always, be sure to follow me on all social media. It's all on the bottom here, but on TikTok, X, and YouTube, it is at Texans Commenter, COMMENTER. And then on Instagram and Facebook, it is at Houston Stressans. And of course, I have my website, HoustonStressans.com. I got articles on there. I got a store with plenty of merch. I've been saying I'm going to do this, and I'll probably do it tomorrow, just if I don't remind me. But I want to do like a 15-20% off sale for all Texans merch for the off season. And I'll probably come out with some new stuff too. Still, I mean, I'm 24/7 Texans. I'm sure a lot of y'all are too if you're tuned in right now. But yeah, on the site we got the store, you got the articles. If y'all ever want to write articles yourself, if you just want to get like an op-ed out there to get an opinion out there, you're more than welcome to. If you haven't, please subscribe to the free newsletter. That helps me quite a bit. And then also on the site, this is something I'll start to push more. I released it, was the Discord, where basically it's like I call it a Discord. It's like Discord. It's like forums. So I'd like to get that going. I understand it's tough, like we all have our own apps and it's kind of hard to get off of an app, but I feel like it's a great place to kind of congregate or aggregate, which is basically what I do most of this Texan stuff in one place. And then also I have the directory. If you ever want to look up content creators, feel free to go on there and check it out. I got over 100 people and all their, different links on there. So that's one big idea for me, is to kind of like have an ecosystem where every content creator can host all their info, all their podcasts and shows. I'm actually debating making that site into an app because I feel like it may not be that user friendly to go on your phone on mobile, which most of us are on, into your browser. So I'll probably getting y'all's feedback if y'all would be, if y'all think that would be worth my time to do. Is basically everything I just said make into an app. Um, like in a perfect world, if I could just do it free and in no time, I'd do it. But it may cost money or it may take a lot of time for me to build it. So it's just something that I think if it's feasible, may be a good idea. If you got any thoughts or anything I might have missed questions wise, or if you ever got anything you want to get across, DM me on any of my platforms. I usually get to all comments, but I get to pretty much all DMs as well. So feel free to do that. We got Wow Spartacus. If you're forced to decide the 25th pick, Matthew Golden or Gray Zabel. That's tough because again, we don't know where we're at, but I would say I assume we signed Diggs, and I feel like Gray Zabel. I would take Gray Zabel. I feel like it's hard to pass him up. I feel like there's more depth at receiver, maybe not in this draft, but just generally every year. I feel like receivers are more dime a dozen than unicorn interior alignment like that. Brandon says I would go Zabel in a lower round wide receiver. Yep, that's basically what I said. So you look at Nico Collins, Tank Dell, third round picks. There's always a bunch of receivers. Matthew Golden, he's a good receiver. He would be. I think he can play the Z position. I need to look at him more. He's dynamic. He's a great athlete. So yeah, that's all I got. I guess I can just show the site real quick, and then if anything else comes up in the meantime, let me know. Again, I'll be going live tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will be sharing that soon, but let me see if I can pull up. Let's see, Stressans, and then we got. Let me share my screen over here, and we'll go to there. Share. And if y'all don't want to watch this, you don't have to. I'm sure it's boring, but yeah. So if you could, right there, subscribe to the free newsletter. That would be much appreciated. You basically just click on it and you just type in your email, and then I usually send it weekly. I'll probably keep that up in the off season. I need to start writing more articles. It's just tough with all the stuff that I do. And then also right there is a button is log in. You can, create your own profile, and that's the Discord. I think I have mine. Let's see if I can log in and kind of show you what it looks like. And then so once you're logged in, now it's like your icon right here. You can click on that. You got a Discord. Again, it's not really active. I haven't really pushed it, but it's pretty cool. We got 30 people that are signed up for it, but we got Jamarcus Russell who signed up. That's pretty cool. That's hilarious. But yeah, you can like, comment. You can, it's pretty in depth as far as like GIFs and media, video. You can plug it. You can embed posts from different social media. So that's pretty cool. So ideally, like we could start a thread on here, like new Texans hire, and like start like a mega thread, and then, all share stuff. And again, like I'm not trying to make it like a replacement for social media, but that's another avenue. And then, I didn't even mention too, like I have this is something I need to continue to revamp is the videos. It's like I basically create a bunch of playlists and provide content for you. I find the videos for you and you just watch them on here. I have different playlists, like my content. I need to update this, but video, there's a national media video on Nick Caley. You got the Stingley interview. So basically all the Texans content, you can just spend your time on here. My main goal is to make life easier, make it easier to be a Texans fan. I know everyone's busy and has got stuff to do. Let me do all the hard work. I'll find all the, as Sean said on the radio one day, let me find the good stuff and trust my judgment to give you what you need. You got press conferences. You can go by player, Joe Mixon, CJ Stroud. You can spend hours on here. I got several more playlists I can add to that. So that's just another part of that. And then obviously the store. I got a couple Rocket stuff. This one is actually not released yet. This is Brado and Will's shirt from Rockets Twitter. I probably shouldn't be showing that, but it's on there. And then, oh yeah, if y'all haven't seen this, my nephew does 3D printing. He printed my logo for me and was really cool. And I posted it and got crazy good feedback. So I made it available to sell. $20 a piece. This is a 6x8, and basically all proceeds, I think he nets like around 10 or 15 bucks when it's all said and done, all goes to him. You know, he's in junior high. So kind of teaching him how to run a business by doing that. You can also do custom orders if you have your own logo or want something else. Just shoot me a DM. It would cost more than this because you would have your initial fee to create the file. But once the file is created, it's just 20 bucks, essentially based off size after that. So, yeah, man. I mean, if y'all ever like have any ideas for merch that you want me to make, be more than happy to do it. But yes, that's all I got. We got another comment right here. Brandon Hallman says Jalen Royals, Ty Felton, Jalen Noel, Jack Beck, lots of options. Yeah, wide receiver is stacked in the draft for sure, but that's all I got. Let's see if I can stop sharing my screen and say goodbye. Where did I go? Let's see. Stop sharing my screen. You know, I always got some hiccups where I'm not, if I push that button there, where I'm not messing up. But yeah, appreciate you guys. Quick recap on just overall. I'm happy with the Nick Caley. I'm blessing. I'm big blessing. I actually just got in the playbook right here. I will be diving into this. Maybe I can come back with some info. This is the 2024 Los Angeles Rams playbook. It's by Bobby Peters. Found out about this from Texans Cap. He's a ball knower. I actually had the 2023 Houston Texans one. I might have to set that on fire. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see y'all tomorrow.